Good morning. Hi, it's Tracy here with the RCAW, and thank you for attending today. We have Erin Thomsen here again talking about fall protection, part 2. I also wanted to point out that we have handouts that are attached to this, which are the slides from part 1 and part 2. And so you can go ahead and go to the handout section on your drop-down menu, and you can download those to your computer. They're in PDF. So if you have to refer back to anything, you can. With that said, I am going to turn this over to Erin and let her share her screen. So hang on just 1 second and we'll be ready to go. There you go, Erin.
All right, show my screen. Excellent, good.
Perfect.
All right, welcome everybody. 2 weeks later, I hope everybody's been doing well. And Tracy and I were just talking about the crazy weather that we have going on around here. And I hope we're all ready for the winter months. I couldn't imagine being roofers out there in the wet and the snow and the winter months. So good on all you guys. So hopefully you didn't have any questions that came up over the last 2 weeks about what we covered in the first session. If you do, please feel free again at the end of all of this, ask your questions and I'll try and answer them as best as I can. You have handouts from the first session and handouts from what we're going to cover here today. So I just wanted to refresh your memories. It's been 2 weeks. These are the new WAC codes, the Washington Administrative Codes. It's now 296-880. And we covered 095. We covered the definitions. We covered the 100s, which were the general requirements, fall protection regardless of height, your training requirements, having that fall protection plan. We covered the 200s, which was fall protection required at 4 feet. Because now in the Unified Fall Protection Code, we really only have 2 trigger heights. It's at 0, regardless of height, and then it's at 4 feet. Then you get into the 300, so we're going to cover 300-05, which only pertains to construction. There's 310, 315, 320, so on and so forth. But guys, I really didn't think that any of us cared about those. That's for ski lifts, and that's for ports and different industries out there that are not actually construction. So in the 300s, this is now what's required, anything above 4 feet for the different industries that you actually belong to. Fixed industry, again, construction, if you're in the ski lift area, all of that kind of good stuff. So for the 305s, we'll talk about the construction. It's really just the 10-foot rule. And then we're going to cover a few of these here in the 400s. The 400s are how do you protect at 4 feet, at 0 feet, at 10 feet in construction. How do you protect? What are the means and methods that you can use to provide fall protection for your employees? So we're going to run through a few of the 400s. I really want to make sure that we hit warning lines, safety monitor, and make sure that you guys, because you're a trade that can use them, really understand the warning line, the safety monitor requirements, okay? So let's jump into the 300s. Construction work, and what do we have to do for construction work? So 300.05. This scope only applies to work activities under 296155, which is construction based, unless it was specifically addressed in the 200 section, which was the 4-foot rule. So employers need to ensure that some kind of fall arrest system or restraint or positioning device is provided. Make sure that we're installing it per the manufacturer's requirements, that we implement it in accordance with this chapter. Anytime we have workers exposed to hazards that are 10 feet or more above the next level. So you could be 10 feet off the ground, you could be 10 feet up above another level. This does include, if you guys were to ever do work from a scissor lift, 10 foot, fall protection, boom lifts, fall protection 100% of the time. You need a fall protection plan as well. If you're working off of scaffolds, that falls into the 10-foot rule as well. With most scaffolds, it's a 10-foot rule. So when do we have to provide protection? At 10 feet or more. Look at you guys, you lead the way. Engaged in roofing work, only on a low pitch slope though, only on anything that's less than 4 and 12. If you're constructing a leading edge, if we go back and remember what a leading edge was, that was an activity, it's a verb. You have to be actively laying down some kind of form work, some kind of roofing, right? So you need to be laying down the plywood to start building the roof. You need to be laying down form work, constructing a leading edge. Or if you're engaged in the erection or placement of structural members. So what were structural members? That was a girder, it was a beam, it was a joist. If we stand the walls and we're walking on that 2x4, that 3.5-inch 2x4 top plate, that's now considered a structural member. So we have a 10-foot exemption for these guys. At 4 feet, low pitched, you guys don't need any fall protection per se. But once you get to 10 feet, then you're going to have to protect. And then the bottom one, D, it does not apply to you guys. I highly doubt you're trenching or excavating on a rooftop. So this is for the ground workers, the dirt workers. There's always been a 10-foot rule. You don't have to be in fall protection if you're actively involved in an excavation or a trenching operation, actively involved. If I'm just wandering around that trench or that excavation, if I'm not engaged in the work taking place, then yeah, if it's deeper than 10 feet, we're going to have some protection for me. There's going to be exemptions. So the 305 guys, it's really short. This is it. 305 at 10 feet. Who gets to, or when do you have to provide protection? 10 feet, roofing, leading edge, standing up structural members. There's exemptions to the 10-foot rule. These are basically the exact same exemptions that went into the 200 4-foot rule. So who is exempt? First man up, last man down. You're going up onto the rooftop to set your anchors, you're exempt. You've finished all of your work, you're the last guy coming down, you're disassembling your anchor point, your fall protection system, you're exempt. Inspecting, investigating, assessing the roof level conditions, again, only low sloped, less than 4 and 12. Anything over 412 is a steep pitch, and you are not exempt. So what was inspecting? You're going up on the rooftop to inspect to see how much materials you need to do your job. You're investigating. What was investigating? We're going up on the rooftop to look for damage, to assess if there's anything that needs to be repaired, right? And then assessing the roof level conditions. Anytime we're going up on the rooftop to try and figure out what type of fall protection we're going to be providing to our workers, we have an exemption as well. Low sloped only. This does not apply to steep pitched roofs. You probably don't remember this, but back in the 200 code, it stated that a working walking surface was anything that we worked from, stood on, passed along, gained access to, and it included flatbed trucks. So at 4 feet, if I was working on a flatbed truck, potentially my employer would have to provide fall protection for me if it was feasible, if it was something that made sense, if it was not going to create a greater hazard, and if it was feasible, all right? But we do have an exemption in construction. So if we're in construction, no matter the height, all right, so from 4 to 10, we actually do not have to provide protection for our employees. We are exempt when we're located on vehicles or rolling stock in order to perform our job duties, okay? So this kind of goes along the same theme. If you're a roofing company and you actually have a yard, like a laydown yard, and you're loading your own flatbed trucks with your roofing materials that you're going to deliver to a job site, while you're in your yard loading that flatbed, you are not considered to be engaged in new construction. So if that flatbed was over 4 feet, you would have to, if it's feasible, you would have to provide protection for your employees. Once you've loaded that truck and you drive it off to a construction site, and now you're unloading it on your construction site, you have an exemption. You do not have to provide fall protection for these guys, okay? But then you load back up at the construction site, you go back to your yard, you're unloading that truck. Here again, while you're at your yard, you are not actively construction. So you do not have this exemption, all right? So just be careful with this one. Number C, that 4-foot rule, rolling stock. If it's not engaged in construction work, you have to protect. But when you're on an active construction site, you have this exemption. So this is where fixed industries and some of you guys who float back and forth between having your own yard, loading up your own flatbeds, you might get caught in this kind of gray area. But it does, remember, go back to feasibility. Now, I did some rabbit hole research over the weekend, and I went down the rabbit hole for what type of fall protection is actually out there for trucks and trailers, for flatbeds. And by gum, if you wouldn't know that there are actually some fall protection out there. There's temporary guardrails, there's temporary anchor systems where your truck tires drive over the base of the anchor system. You've got a vertical bar that goes up into the air, and your workers are attached to that. So they're in like a yo-yo system when they're on their flatbed. So keep in mind, L&I is really good at figuring out feasibility, especially knowing that there are systems out there that are available to us now. So if you're engaged in work like this and you have flatbeds that you're loading up, you might need to do a little bit more research about how you can potentially protect your workers. So that's really all we need to talk about when it comes to the construction portion of this. Again, 10 foot, when we're roofing, less than 4 and 12, when we're performing leading edge, laying down the form work or the roof work, right? Laying down those plywood sheets, or if we're standing structural members or engaged in trenching. So how do you protect people? Guardrails. Guardrails are always the preferred method. Why are guardrails the preferred method? Because guardrails prevent the fall. They restrain you. And restraint, prevention of the fall, is always going to be your preferred method. So we'll talk about guardrails. Any open sides above 4 feet has to be protected. If there's people working below you, toe boards need to be put into place so that we're not kicking stuff down on top of them. All of your walking, working surfaces, all open sides, ramps, platforms, runways, we're above 4 feet, we need to have protection. Needs to be made out of standard strength in construction. All right, toe boards, you're just putting up as a overhead restraint for kicking off any tools or kicking any materials on to the people who are walking below you, saving materials and tools and debris from falling onto persons passing through or walking into the area below. So guardrails, you guys should all be pretty familiar with this. Nothing really changed in the new unified code when it comes to guardrails. Your top rail, we like to see it in at 42. But you have a plus or minus of 3. You can actually raise it up to 45 or drop it down to 39. This is always from the work surface up. Still has to be able to withstand 200 pounds of bursting strength. This is if I'm basically pushing down at it from a downward angle to the top bar, or from a sideways angle, a lateral angle onto that top rail. It has to be able to withstand 200 pounds. That's minimum. We can always beef these things up and make them stronger. Mid rail goes in at mid height, whatever you chose for the top rail. Mid rail has to withstand 150. Toe boards, there was a change to toe boards. Previous to this WAC code change for the unification of the fall protection, toe boards in Washington State were technically required to be 4 inches in vertical height, not to be more than a 1/4 inch off of the ground. 4 inches. Nobody had 4-inch toe boards. The common practice is that it's a 2x4 flipped up on its edge, right? Well, 2x4s are not actually 4 inches. OSHA says it's a 3.5 inch requirement. So we changed our standard here to just meet OSHA, and it's now 3.5 inches vertical height. Best practice, of course, is always going to be your 2x4 on its edge. Your vertical members of your guardrails, not to exceed 8 feet. When you guys are up there on the rooftop, if that parapet on the roof is less than 39 inches, it cannot be part of your fall protection. It can be the mid rail, but it cannot be your top rail. So the parapet wall, if it's less than 39 inches, you might have to bring in some other means and methods to protect your worker. It's got to meet that lowest minimum requirement of the top rail to then be considered fall protection. Okay, so guardrails, where do we use them? All ramps, all runways, anything that's inclined. If you're using ramps to get to access areas, you look at that right-hand picture, ramps are always supposed to be at minimum 18 inches wide, not to be inclined more than 20 degrees. That's a pretty steep ramp right there, you guys. If they're inclined, then you need to cleat these things out or treat them with something that's slip resistant so we don't slide down these. This would be a runway. This would be a walkway area where people are working. This is more for concrete forming. They create their own walkways. It's basically kind of considered a scaffold. Here you've got guardrails that don't extend all the way out along the open sides and does not close off that end there. So this is where they would need protection. Up there on the rooftops, if we have any holes on the ground, if we have any holes, we're going to have to protect. What was a hole? If you go back to what we talked about 2 weeks ago, a hole was anything, it was a void that was greater than 2 inches in its least dimension. It was in the floor, it was in a roof, or it was in any other surface. So that can mean it's in the ground as well. Hole covers need to be made of material that meets the following strength requirements. You can see right here, if you have holes that are located in roadways and vehicular aisles, they must be designed to carry a truck rear axle load of at least 2 times the maximum intended load. How much does that truck weigh? What's the load in that truck driving over that steel plate? And can that steel plate withstand 2 times the rear axle load of what's being intended on it, right? What's being imposed on it. Covers need to be able to support. This is new. This is a new strength requirement for hole covers. They must be capable of supporting without failure at least twice the weight of the employees, twice the weight of the equipment, twice the weight of the materials that may be imposed on that cover at any one time. So here's a hole that's been opened up. They've written hole on their cover, but they've left it unattended. That's one thing you cannot do. If you're going to remove a cover and you have a hazard, you cannot leave it unattended. You've got to post somebody there to warn everybody that there is a hazard. Covers need to be secured when you install them so they can't get kicked around, accidental displacement. You can color code it like the top picture. High visit out in orange or lime green or yellow, just so it draws attention to people's eyes. If you don't color code it, you need to write hole or cover on that covering so people know what it's actually protecting. Again, if you remove your cover, what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to post an attendant whose sole job is to stand there and warn people before they fall into that hole. Okay? A hole is a void 2 inches or larger through which an employee could step into, trip into, or step through. Anything larger than 2 inches needs to be protected. So you can cover things. You can ask your workers to wear a PFAS, a personal fall arrest system. All right, so there's some requirements that come into wearing personal fall arrest systems. Obviously, we need to wear only an ANSI approved class 3 full body harness. ANSI, ANSI, American National Standards Institute. Fall arrest, fall protection gear is a Z359 series. So it has to meet the Z359 series, full class 3 body harness. Anything that's been subject to impact loading, if a worker has fallen in it, it's removed immediately from service. It's not to be used again until it's been inspected by that competent person. Competent person simply has skills, knowledge, ability to recognize hazards, ability to predict hazards. They have some safety training, they have experience, and they have stop work authority. So it's usually the competent person who's inspecting the equipment Anything found damaged is removed from service. It is not reused. Some components, like your cable SRLs, you can send those back to the manufacturer and have them recertify it for you and send it back to you. If you're up there on the rooftop, guys, any safety lines and lanyards need to be protected against being cut or abraded, so you might have to throw down some softeners. Here's a picture of a rooftop, and these were 2 window washers who were hanging over the side in bosun chair scaffolds, and they had just wrapped their ropes around this, metal framing here that had sharp edges. Softener on the left-hand side with the blue rope, no softener with the right rope, the red rope. Safety lines and lanyards need to be protected against being cut or abraded anytime they're going over edges that might be sharp, that could potentially cause damage. We need to be protecting those things, all right? So the red one, big no-no. Left one is okay with the softeners. What's not okay is just tying that rope around, wrapping it a couple of times and tying it back on itself as your anchor system. If you guys are up there on the rooftop, and quite often I see roofers, they're in fall protection. If you're engaged in leading edge versus non-leading edge, there is a big difference between the type of equipment that you're going to provide your workers. The left-hand side is non-leading edge. Anytime you have to anchor below your D-ring, anchoring below your D-ring puts you into a leading edge situation. So if you have to anchor below your D-ring, you're anchoring to the ground. You're using temporary anchors on the rooftop, and they're screwed into the actual flooring. If you're using a yo-yo, you need to be in a leading edge yo-yo. The right-hand side is a leading edge. The left-hand side is non-leading edge. So again, not to get too deep into this rabbit hole, the difference here is that the non-leading edge, once you fall, and you're dangling over that edge and you make this 90-degree angle with your cable or your webbing, you're going to swing every time you fall. You're going to swing a little bit, right? So when you're swinging back and forth, the non-leading edge is potentially going to abrade and your cable's going to snap. With the leading edge, the right-hand side, this one is made for leading edge. There's no X through it. There's protection built into the cable. So if you were to go over that edge and swing back and forth, your cable will not abrade. We actually had a fatality in construction in 2018 out there on the Kiewit Sound Transit project off of 520 around the 148th Street exit. A worker passed away. He was a 53-year-old man who had retired. They asked him to come back because he was so good at his job. Can you come back for 2 months worth of work? We've got this special project. So he went back to work for 2 months. 2:30 in the morning, they had a fall protection plan that said they were wearing non-leading edge yo-yos, but they were anchoring high, meaning they were anchoring above their D-ring. For whatever reason, 2:30 in the morning, he's in a non-leading edge. He anchors low. So he anchors below his D-ring. He falls off of the column that he was working on. He swung back and forth a couple of times after his system arrested his fall. And while he swung, because he was in a non-leading edge, his cable abraded and he ended up falling to his death, okay? So it really does matter what type of yo-yo you use for these situations. Anchor systems up there on the rooftop, guys. Sometimes you have permanent anchors. Sometimes you might be working with temporary anchors. It's just the same. Anchors, nothing has changed here. They need to withstand 5,000 pounds of force. They need to be installed per the manufacturer's requirements. I love horizontal lifelines. I think any chance you get an opportunity to put your crew in a horizontal lifeline, do it. It minimizes your swing fall factor. It keeps an anchor point pretty much always in line with your worker. But the problem about horizontal lifelines is, of course, you're anchoring low. With most of them, they're anchored to the rooftop, which means that if you were not using a lanyard, like a 6-foot-long lanyard, if you were allowed to get up to the edge, you would need to make sure you were in a leading edge yo-yo. But there are temporary anchor systems that you can anchor up high. There are some that come with cross straps, so you can wrap a cement column and you can string it up between 2 vertical members that can support 5,000 pounds as part of your anchoring system. Horizontal lifelines, great little device out there. I really, really encourage people, when you have the opportunity, get your workers out of the lifelines where all of the slack is out. There's only like 2 anchor points on a rooftop, and they've walked 30 feet away from their anchor line. Get them into a horizontal lifeline if you can. Figure out some system to keep that anchor point always right there with your worker. Horizontal lifelines, another way you can protect. Here's an example of a horizontal lifeline. I did a competency fall protection training on a Microsoft rooftop because they had brought in this really cool horizontal lifeline system with a new toggle that actually ran over the anchor point. So we did a fall protection training on that horizontal lifeline. It was a slick system, you guys. I tell you what, that was a really neat system. But again, Microsoft, there's probably a little bit of extra cash going into these projects than on some of maybe your residential construction work. One thing they brought into the how do you protect people, if you go to 400.35, you get into self-rescue devices. With self-rescue devices, you have a couple of means. Trauma straps, I highly encourage that you spend they're $30 accessory, you guys. Spend the extra $30, get your workers into trauma straps. They're universal, they attach to any harness out there. There's different makes, different models, DBI, Sala, Guardian, Faltech, all of these guys have trauma straps out there. It's just a way for your worker, once they've fallen and they're waiting for you to figure out how to get them safely down to the ground, they can deploy their own trauma straps. They can put their legs into them. They can get circulation back into their legs. Blood likes to pool in our lower extremities when we're hanging from a harness. So this way we can get circulation. A couple of the manufacturers out there have things like these self-rescue devices. The second picture here, this is a DBI Sala has some really cool, interesting self-rescue methods. It's an external backpack, and it actually attaches to your harness. It's got its own D-ring that you then connect off to that D-ring that it's attached to your harness. And when you fall, there's a little rip cord. And when you fall, you can actually rip that cord. You can pull the rip cord, and inside of this pack, there's lengths of cable that will lower you now down to the ground. They come in 25-foot long lengths, 50-foot, 100-foot. Really cool little self-rescue device. If you're going to bring a self-rescue device into your fall arrest, it must be addressed in your fall protection plan. Don't forget to put that in your plan, and then ensure that all of your workers have actually been trained in how to deploy these systems. So the warning line, this is a really good method of protection that you as roofers can engage in. A warning line system, low sloped pitch only, cannot be steep pitched. Warning line, anybody can use this. It's not just for roofers and leading edge. So Sparkies can use it, your plumbers can use it, your HVAC guys can use it. All right, anytime we're less than 4 and 12, even leading edge work on low pitched open surfaces for activities other than roofing work or leading edge, other than roofing work, okay? So if I'm not a roofer, if I'm not doing leading edge, the warning line has to be 15 feet back, okay? Around all unprotected open areas of that work area. If I'm roofing and I'm doing leading edge work, we can potentially push that warning line out to 6 feet from that edge, if I'm roofing or if I'm doing leading edge work. If we have mechanical equipment up there on the rooftop, it can't be less than 6 feet, all right? And depending on the direction in which we're working with that equipment, it's either going to be 6 feet or it's going to be 10 feet. So if we're working parallel to that roof edge, on the left-hand side, if we're working parallel with mobile equipment, it can be 6 feet. But if we're working perpendicular to that warning line, it has to be 10 feet. There really should be no equipment stored beyond that 6-foot mark. If you're storing equipment out here beyond the 6-foot mark, anybody going underneath that warning line system to get that equipment, that materials, they would need to be protected. So they would need to be anchored off to duck underneath that 6-foot warning line, okay? So warning lines, No more than 4 and 12. You can use a rope, you can use a wire, you can use a wire cable, you can use a chain. Heck, you can even now, you can use danger tape or caution tape. So there was a change to our warning line. In the new Unified Fall Protection Code, there was a change to the strength requirements of our warning line. Ella and I, prior to the changes, just said that your warning line had to be able to withstand 200 pounds of tensile strength. Tensile is pulling apart strength, right? If I pull on it and you pull on it like a tug of war, it shall not break with less than 200 pounds of tensile strength. Well, OSHA was always very curious about this because OSHA says a warning line has to be able to withstand 500 pounds of tensile strength. So they're like, Washington, we need you to clean this up. And so Washington did. Your warning line now has to be able to withstand 500 pounds of tensile strength. If you use danger tape or caution tape, it has to be at minimum 3.5 inches wide, and it has to be able to withstand 500 pounds of tensile strength. And there is extra strong strength warning line and caution tape, danger tape, that can actually withstand that tensile strength, okay? No adverse weather conditions, guys, that's up to you and your competent person. They do not define what adverse conditions are. It could be too rainy, it could be too snowy, too sleety, too icy, too foggy, too smoky, too windy. Adverse, that's up to you to determine. Usually it's the competent person determining adverse conditions. Points of access, materials, storage, connected to the work area by clear access forming 2 warning lines. I need to know exactly where I can walk on this rooftop. Materials not stored within 6 feet of the roof edge unless guardrails are erected. If you're not erecting guardrails, you're going to have to put a worker into a harness and fall restraint or fall arrest if I'm allowed to go under or closer than that 6-foot mark. Warning line, you guys can use it. You can push it out to 6 feet when you're actively roofing. But that means if you're going to be up there on the rooftop and you're going to erect your warning line system, if there's sparkies and plumbers and they're wandering around the rooftop with you, your warning line's been pushed out to 6 feet. Those sparkies and plumbers, they're not allowed to use that 6-foot warning line. They need to maintain a 15-foot clearance from all open edges. So be very cautious and careful about allowing other trades to use your warning line if you've pushed it out to that 6-foot mark. So roofers and leading edge workers can use the warning line system. Roofers and leading edge workers can also use the warning line system with the safety monitor, okay? If you're less than 50 feet wide, the roof is less than 50 feet in width, you can use the safety monitor without the warning line system. But if it's wider than 50 feet, you have to bring in both safety monitor with the warning line. Nobody but roofers and leading edge workers can use a safety monitor. It's just the 2 of you as a trade who can actually use your safety monitor. If you guys do engage in the safety monitor, I really want to impress upon the fact that this is the biggest adult game of Simon Says that you're ever going to play, and it is literally for your life, because nobody has to potentially be in fall protection. You are solely relying on that safety monitor to ensure that nobody falls off the rooftop today. So it's a big game of Simon Says. That safety monitor needs to be competent. When he says stop, just like Simon Says, when Simon says stop, everybody better stop. Safety monitor absolutely not allowed to engage in any other duties while he's acting as the safety monitor. Here's a picture of a safety monitor who is doing what? Who is giving hand signals. That really should not be taking place. Engaged in no other duties. Not supervise more than 8 exposed workers at a time. And quite honestly, guys, I think 8 is a lot to keep track of. But you can potentially have 8 exposed workers. Safety monitor needs to be positioned in relation to the workers so that they have a clear, unobstructed view and able to maintain normal vocal communications. Do you guys understand that normal vocal communications, the normal tone that you talk to somebody is between 64 to 70 decibels, and the average street noise is pushing 85 decibels? It comes down to this. When you're on a job site and you're only standing 2 to 3 feet away from each other, and you have to talk to each other like this, that's not normal vocal communication, right? So you're not supposed to be screaming and yelling at these people and startling them. You're supposed to just very clearly and carefully say, hey, Erin, it looks like you're getting a little too close to that roof edge. You might want to take a step back. Hey, Tracy, it looks like you're going to trip over all of the slack out in your lifeline. You might want to bring your slack up and be very cautious about where you're stepping right now, right? Not scaring these people by yelling at them. Instantly distinguishable over other members in the work crew, only while we're in the control zone. So if we're going to have the safety monitor, it needs to go like this. The safety monitor needs to be in high-vis orange. All right, pick a color. Pink, I don't care what it is, but they need to be the only person in that color. The 8 people that are potentially exposed, they need to be in a separate color. So I'm in pink, Tracy and her crew are wearing our typical high-vis yellow. If there's any other workers up on the rooftop not exposed, they need to be in a different color as well. So we can quickly identify, okay, there's the 8 workers that Erin in her separate color is actually monitoring. All the rest of those guys in lime green are not supposed to be in that, the affected area, okay? So potentially if you had a bunch of people up there, you might need 3 different colors of high vis so we can instantly distinguish all of these members. My job, safety monitor, is to simply warn you if it looks like you're going to be doing something hazardous. If it looks like you're going to be getting yourself into trouble, not paying attention, looking down at your phone. Here's a guy with no warning line. The warning line has fallen over. He's standing fairly close. He's about 3 feet away from that edge. He's not in any kind of fall protection. He's waiting to receive materials and he's looking down at his phone, all right? So every employee working in the control zone promptly complies with the fall hazard and the warnings. You could use a safety watch system. A safety watch is a 1-to-1. One person performing the repair work or doing the actual work, one person monitoring that person, all right? Not to get in within 6 feet of the edge of the rooftop where exposure to falls is infrequent. So this is when we can use it. All right, employer must ensure the safety watch system meets these following requirements. There can only be 2 people up there on the rooftop when it's being used, only 2 people on the rooftop when it's being used. One person is acting as the safety watch while the other employee is engaged in the repair work or the servicing of the equipment or anything along those lines. You cannot have mechanical equipment in use, no mechanical equipment. And you cannot use this when weather conditions are going to create additional hazards. It's too windy, it's too rainy, it's sleeting, it's snowing, yada, 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 okay? Catch platforms. A lot of times I hear from roofers, there's a scaffold right below you. Can we use the scaffold as part of our fall protection? And this was an area where L&I and OSHA differed significantly. L&I has always said that a catch platform, prior to this new unification, a catch platform had to meet the working walking surface definition, which used to be 45 inches by 45. Now a working walking surface is just anything that we can stand on regardless of its width, okay? So L&I said had to be 45 by 45, had to have guardrails around all open sides, had to be erected no further than 14 inches away from the side of the building, no less than 4 feet from the actual roofing area, had to have toe kicks, had to be pretty much right there for us. But it didn't have a strength requirement. No strength requirement for L&I, and OSHA found that quite odd. OSHA actually says that you could use a scaffold system as your catch platform because scaffolds have a strength requirement. They must be able to withstand 4 times the intended load. But L&I was like, oh, heck no, you can't use a scaffold. No way. And so they fought back and forth a little bit, and what was finally agreed upon is that we're going to still say you cannot use a scaffold, but we're going to give a strength requirement to our catch platform. So catch platforms must meet the strength and stability requirements of, guess what? Supported scaffolds, which is what? 4 times the intended load. You still cannot use a scaffold in Washington State, but we placated OSHA and we said, all right, we'll give it a strength requirement. We'll use your scaffold since you guys say you can use them for platforms. We'll use the scaffold strength requirement. 45 inches wide, guardrails around all open sides, toe boards no more than 4 feet within the vertical working area. All right, guys, so that basically wraps it up. That's the protections for the 300 code, your 10-foot rule. Who's got a 10-foot exemption, basically? Or when does fall protection start? For roofers, low sloped, it starts at 10 feet. All right, starts at 10 feet. At 4 feet, you don't have to provide any protection, okay? At 4 feet low sloped roofing, you don't have to have fall protection for your workers. At 10 feet, you do. You're exempt, first man up, last man down. You're exempt when you're inspecting, trying to figure out how much materials you need to do your job. If you're looking for damage, you have to do some repair and you're assessing the damage. If you're assessing the work area to try and figure out what type of fall protection you're actually going to use for your employers or your employees, you have that exemption, okay? Only low sloped pitched roofs. You protect by using guardrails. You protect by covering your holes. Holes have a strength requirement of 2 times the weight of the worker, the materials, the load that's going to be imposed upon them. That's always minimum. Guardrails go in at 42. Mid-rail goes in at mid-height. Toe boards are now 3.5 inches tall. We have new strength requirements for the warning line system. Strength requirements, 500 pounds tensile. If you're using rope or cable for a warning line system, you must high vis it out, put a high vis flag every 6 feet. All right, but that's not new. That's always been a requirement. Warning lines high vised out every 6 feet. Okay, so new requirement, 500 pounds of tensile strength. New strength requirement to our catch platforms. You guys can use a safety monitor system with or without the warning line. It just depends on the width of your rooftop. Your roof is wider than 50 feet. You must use both of them, warning line with the safety monitor. It's less than 50 feet. You can use just the safety monitor. So that takes us about to where we needed to be. It's 1:15. Thank you for listening to me again. I hope you guys are all still awake and I didn't lull you into a sense of sleep. Maybe you're inside of a warm building. So Tracy, if you're around there, if you could open back up. I'm not sure if I need to unshare myself. There you are.
Here I am. Hey, so we have a few questions here. The first one is, does your company have any competent person training?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you for asking that question. We train all kinds of things. We can do a quick little, 2.5, 3-hour awareness class. We can do a 4-hour competency, 6-hour competency. Like I said, I ended up doing a 16-hour competency class for, the roofers out there on the Microsoft campuses. So we can tailor it to your needs for sure. Awareness classes, right now we've been doing awareness classes. We've been including fall protection with ladders, and it's a 4-hour class. But we could do just fall protection for you, and that would drop it down to like a 2.5, 3-hour class. Competency, really, it should be no less than 4 hours, preferably, 4.5, 5 to 6 hours for the length of a competency class. We go into a lot more details. We do a lot more inspecting of equipment, ensuring that they understand swing fall hazards, the clearance factors that are needed for effective fall protection. So we go into a lot more detail for our competency classes. But just remember this, sending them to one of our classes does not make them competent. You as employers determine who's competent and you send them to one of our classes, and we provide the safety training. So somebody's competent because they have some knowledge, they have some skills already shown in fall protection. They have the ability to identify hazards and predict hazards for fall protection for working on the rooftops. They have some knowledge, they have some experience. We cannot give them experience, right? And then you give them the stop work authority. They don't have to be leads, they don't have to be supervisors, they don't have to be foremans. It can be anybody in the crew who just has those attributes. So absolutely, if you would love to take more learning, more classes, we would love to train.
Awesome. Do you have any revised fall protection plan template?
We do have templates. Yes, thank you for that question. We have revised fall protection templates. Now, here's the thing, guys. There's really no revisions that you need to do in your fall protection templates. It's just going to come down to this. Look at the top of your fall protection plan. Are you still referencing WAC code 296155? And if you're referencing 296155, white that out, put in 296880 and call it good. There's nothing technically that we need to revise in our fall protection plans. Okay? Now, if you're using things like warning lines, you would just simply write into your fall protection plan, yes, we're going to be using a warning line, low sloped roof only. Warning line is going to have a strength requirement of 500 tensile pounds. We're going to high visit out every 6 feet, verticals not to exceed 8 feet. It's not going to sag, right? It's going to meet, basically your warning line now has to meet 45 inches and no less than 39 inches. It pretty much just falls into a guardrail. A warning line's a visual. You're not supposed to fall into it and have it save your life. It's just a visual that there's a hazard out there in front of you. But yes, we have templates to fall protection plans. Let Tracy know. We'd be more than happy to send you some templates.
Perfect. Are there any toolbox talks about fall protection that you guys have available?
We have all kinds of toolbox talks. Yes, absolutely. We can send you some of them, but there are all kinds of free toolbox talks out there on the interwebs. In fact, there's a website that's just called Toolbox Talks, Toolbox Talks. L&I has Toolbox Talks on their website. So you can also go to the L&I website. You can go to their safety and health tab. And from there, you can go down to training. And under their training program, they have toolbox talks as well. So you can suss around through there. If you don't see something that you like, we are always more than happy to send you some toolboxes.
Perfect. Well, that looks like all the questions, unless anybody else wants to type one in real fast. But in the meantime, I want to thank you, Erin, for great lunch and learns for the past couple weeks. These are really informative, and thank you very much. It's a super important topic here in our roofing community, that we make sure that everybody's safe and protected, especially from falls. I want to remind everybody who's on here that there's handouts to download, which include all the slides from today and from part one. So if you missed one or the other, or just want to have the slides on hand to refer to, they're here to download. If you don't get them downloaded today, you can always reach out to me, and I'd be more than happy to send them to you. We have a break from our lunch and learns because of the Thanksgiving holiday. Can you even believe it's Thanksgiving already? And we will resume our lunch and learns on December 8th at 11 a.m. And we'll have Jared Geiser from Eagle View here talking about their mobile app and their partners that integrate into their mobile app. And I know a lot of you use Eagle View, so you won't want to miss that. With that said, I think we're going to wrap everything up. Again, thank you so much, Erin, and thank you everyone for participating today. And we look forward to seeing you again.
And I'll just say again really quickly, thank you everyone. Thank you, Tracy, for allowing me to speak to everybody. You know, I know that Jennifer had me do this because quite honestly, guys, fall protection is one of the classes that I'm extremely passionate about. Falls are the leading cause of fatalities out there in our job sites. And quite honestly, that not enough people have the correct fall protection training. They don't understand their swing fall. They don't understand their clearance factor. And you see a lot of guys, just because you're wearing a harness, they got a false sense of security. So I'm really passionate about this subject in construction especially. So yeah, you guys want more training? Come have one of my classes. I love training. I love imparting the knowledge on people. I love learning myself. With every class, I learn something different as well. So thank you for allowing me to talk to you guys for these last 2 weeks. Really appreciate it. Everybody take care, be safe through the holidays, and hopefully we'll see you. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you. Bye, guys. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.